Today on the Solar Podcast, load flexibility for commercial customers. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Welcome to the Solar Podcast. Today, my guest is John Powers, the CEO and founder of Extensible Energy. Welcome to the show, John.
It's a pleasure to be here, sir.
Looking forward to learning more about load flexibility, and I want to give a shout out to Nico Johnson. That's how I found out about Extensible Energy on his podcast, which is called Suncast. So thank you, Nico. And, of course, everybody in the renewable energy industry is learning as much as we can about load flexibility, time of use, how batteries play. And you have a software solution that is hardware theoretically independent, but let's give our listeners a high level on how you got so interested in this particular niche topic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks a lot, Tim. And I've been an energy nerd for more than 30 years, my whole career. And I've been watching what's going on in the energy industry. Finally, there's been some changes after so long. And solar is just a fascinating resource because it's clean and renewable and distributed and smart. And that's really great. But electricity still is the only commodity where it has to be used the same second that it's generated. It's impossible to store electricity. It's tough enough to store energy. So we look for ways, if we're going to make the generation side of the grid entirely non-dispatchable, we have to make the load side of the grid more flexible. It just is, it seems obvious to us. So like I said, I've spent a lot of time in the energy business, both retail and wholesale, the last about 7 or 8 years in solar. And so we're looking at ways that we can make the flexible loads in commercial buildings respond to the generation of solar in those same commercial buildings. It seems just like, my training is as an economist. So if you can balance loads and resources, you're always going to come out ahead of utility tariffs and of overall energy expense.
So what exactly is your offering?
Yeah, so we turn dumb buildings into smart buildings in a one-day installation, basically. We work with our solar installation partners during a solar install to add to a commercial solar installation what we call load flexibility software, but it's really just advanced controls of the existing flexible resources in the building. That could be a battery behind the meter, but that's quite expensive and rare. There's not that many batteries out there. It could be car chargers behind the meter because those are quite flexible as well. But in most buildings, the biggest flexible resource is heating and cooling. And that's what we primarily control in most buildings. We use an intelligent control system to shift heating and cooling energy usage away from peak times or expensive on-peak TOU times, which greatly improves the economics of the solar system being installed. So our offering is smart software in the cloud that talks to smart controls in the building.
I understand smart controls, and of course, electricity pricing varies during the time of day. When loads are higher, electricity gets more expensive. But what does this have to do with solar energy?
Right. So my first job out of college was in the rates department of a utility. So I know tariffs pretty well. And any commercial solar installer who has been battling the changes in tariffs in California, Colorado, Illinois, where you work, all over the country, demand charges are getting higher, time of use charges are getting less favorable towards solar. The more we rely on solar on the grid, the more successful solar is, the harder it is for the next solar project to succeed, because what's happening is that the prices are declining in solar rich times of day. So the more you can change the usage pattern of your customers' loads to be contemporaneous with the solar, the more savings you're delivering to your customers. So you want the customer using more energy during the time when your system, your solar system, is producing more energy, because that delivers much higher savings than just net metering alone.
Right. So let's dig a little bit into to that. First of all, who are your ideal customers?
Sure. So we focus on commercial, although we certainly could handle other kinds of flexible loads. We focus on buildings where HVAC is the largest single load in the building. So let's talk about office, retail, church, school, conditioned warehouse, municipal building, any building like that where heating and cooling are the biggest loads in the building. So that's sort of the first place that we look. And we're looking at any place where a good proxy for how to think about this is if demand charges are over about $20,000 per year, that's a great fit for us because we can deliver enough savings to make a big difference in the solar economics at that facility. So that usually means we're looking at solar installations of at least 100 kilowatts. We've done a few that are smaller, but at least 100 kilowatts up to a megawatt, and maybe even a little larger at simple buildings. So the simpler the building, like a big box retail store or a conditioned warehouse is basically a big barn, we can go a little bigger on those. But in the main ones we talked about 100 kilowatts to a megawatt of solar and about 20,000 or more of demand charges or high time of use peak charges.
Okay. And you mentioned solar projects of 100 to 100 kW to a megawatt. Of course, every project is slightly different. Sometimes we're able to offset 25% of the load. Sometimes we're able to offset 100% of the load.
Sure.
And when you say, take full advantage of the solar, it sounds to me like you're assuming that at some point the solar project is spinning the meter backwards, or what are the assumptions you're making there?
Well, not necessarily. It'll work even where the solar is just reducing the midday loads substantially, because those would usually be the highest loads of the day in a building that's being air conditioned or heated. So that way the solar is taking care of a lot of the middle of the day, and then we're working on the beginning and end of the day to flatten out the load shapes. But really the software does a bit more than that. So let me just give an example that's based on how um, buildings interact with high demand charge tariffs. So let's say right now it's the middle of the day in an office building and there's bright sun. The net load of the building is quite low because you've used up, because you've generated enough to reduce the middle of the day. But now let's say I see clouds coming in a couple of hours. So our forecasting algorithm is always looking at what's the solar condition and what's the whole building load condition. So we look out a couple hours. If we see clouds coming, well, that could cause a net demand spike. So we can pre-cool the building by a degree or two now. Nobody notices. It's still just as comfortable inside. But then when the clouds come, we can let the temperature drift back up a couple degrees. Again, nobody notices. Keep the fans running. It's nice and comfortable inside. But we've just pulled a bunch of energy away from what would have been a new demand peak for the month. So it's that kind of small adjustments to energy usage in a building that can make a big, big difference to demand charges in particular. I just for 1 minute want to go back over for any of our listeners how demand charges are calculated, because a lot of people get their intuition about electricity from their home experience. So you and I pay for kilowatt hours at our home, right? But a commercial building can pay anywhere up to half of its electricity bill on the highest 15 minutes of use for the entire month, or in some jurisdictions, the entire year. And so if you think about it, you're paying half your bill based on the worst mistake your building made all month long. And that's called a demand charge in most areas. I guess capacity charge is another word for it in some places. But uh, if you can reduce those worst mistakes, you can save a ton on your electricity bill and deliver a much, much higher return on the total system. Every time we look at it, solar plus DemandEx delivers a higher return on investment than solar alone in any building with a demand charge above about $8 per kilowatt, which is 2/3 of the country. So we're really excited about the additional value we're bringing to our partners. We're an entirely partner-driven business. We work only with solar installation partners, and we always work with them to deliver a better quote with solar plus our software than with solar alone.
I have to ask, so DemandEx versus other ways to attack demand charges like
Sure,
battery storage.
sure,
Um, and we do hear a lot about battery storage coming
sure.
on strong in the California market, in New
Yeah.
York, in Massachusetts. What is the how does DemandEx compare and contrast to installing an ESS?
Right. So uh, I don't know how I've gotten tagged as being the anti-battery guy. I had a debate on a recent podcast that was us versus batteries. And, I love batteries. I drive a battery to work every day. I have a Chevy Bolt that I just love. And I think that's a great use of a battery. But let's go back to what a commercial building really is. So a commercial building was never built to host a complicated um, lithium ion battery system. Okay. So I know batteries getting cheaper because I read it in Green Tech Media and in everywhere else that says batteries now are 100 or 150 bucks per kilowatt hour of capacity, which is great. Except whenever we see a quote for the same battery in a commercial building, it's $1,000 per kilowatt hour or more, at least for small to medium commercial businesses, once you include all the installation. And that's because we're not making master electricians any cheaper, fire suppression any less necessary, permitting any smoother. All these things that are very expensive when you try and pile them on a small number of kilowatt hours really drives up the cost. So we've tried to find a solution that could deliver the same kind of demand charge savings as a battery, same kind of TOU arbitrage as a battery at 1/10 the price. And with no permitting, no master electricians, no rewiring of the building, just a simple change out of controls so that software can play the role that a fixed battery is playing in another installation. In a lot of cases, we can work with a battery that was bought for resilience. Of course, software can't provide resilience. It can work with a battery to provide resilience or backup to the building. But for demand charge management, there's just no contest. It's just vastly less expensive to do it with load flexibility software than with a dedicated battery. Now, I'll put a caveat in, as you did, about California, which is just throwing money out the window on the SCHIP program. Just huge subsidies are being thrown at batteries in some tiny segments of the market. But in any reasonable uh, economic comparison, batteries are great for grid level, where you're talking about megawatt hours and gigawatt hours of capacity. They're great for cars where you're amortizing the engineering cost across a huge fleet of hundreds of thousands of vehicles. But when there's all that bespoke engineering behind the meter for just a few kilowatt hours of storage, it's just a really tough bit of economics to get to have it work.
So, can you give our listeners some examples of what you consider to be a successful integration?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've done some work I'll do one with a battery. I'll talk about a project we did in Colorado with a car dealer that sits out at the end of one of Excel's feeders, was having reliability issues. Whenever they'd get a thunderstorm, they would go offline. So the project developer out there, one of our first partners, specified a good sized solar system, a, a backup battery, and DemandEx, our software for control of their HVAC systems and any other flexible loads. But we're also in charge of deciding when to charge and discharge the battery. Now, since the main purpose of that battery is for resilience, we always leave enough so that they can ride through a short outage. But if you think about it, combining a battery with intelligent control of the loads in the building lets you avoid some of the expense of batteries, even for resilience. So in that case, they did not build a critical loads panel or do any rewiring of their systems. Instead, we monitor when the battery goes offline, and then, or sorry, when the grid goes offline. And when you're drawing from the battery, if there's not enough solar, we can turn off many of the large loads inside the building, particularly the HVAC loads, which are the biggest loads in the building. So by using situational control with software, you can save on the otherwise very heavy engineering expense of putting a battery into a resiliency configuration in a building. So that's a fun project where we're saving a lot on the demand charge based on the control of the HVAC systems alone. We add to that a portion of the battery, so the economics get somewhat better and they can defray some of the expensive costs of the battery for resilience. But that project certainly would never be economical if you did not have intelligent software control, because the energy costs in Colorado are quite low. Demand charges are pretty high. So, you know, the solar alone was a difficult sell. Solar plus a battery, worse yet, unless you have something intelligent doing all the demand controls.
And what is the overall value proposition then to these customers?
Yeah, so let me start with the value proposition to our partners, who are the you know, the way we reach customers. So the solar installers we work with have been looking for a long time for a way to save on demand and time of use charges without the expense of a battery, because many of them have been trying to sell batteries and have had a lot of trouble doing so because they never pencil out in most of the small to medium commercial installations that they're targeting. So we wanted to make sure that the value proposition for our partners made sense for them to present to their customer, which is faster return on investment, faster payback time, simple one-day installation. So I love working with solar installers because they're great project managers. If we train them up and give them a checklist of what to do when they get to the site, they can do it. This is a zero truck roll installation. They're already doing harder things on site than this. So you can do it with the exact same staff, the exact same number of trips to the site as you would do a solar alone installation. It's a little gateway that lets the building talk to our cloud software. And then in a place where there's no current building energy management system, it's a simple rip and replace of dumb thermostats with smart thermostats. One-day installation that brings the building under much, much better control. If there is a building energy management system, it is in some ways easier. All you need is the gateway to be plugged into that, but then we need the contact information of the folks who put that system in, but that's about it. So we try to make our solar partners' job very simple. The result for the end customer is that the building's under better control than before we got there. In a lot of cases, you know, if the main way you control your building is with your thumb, walking around from thermostat to thermostat, poking it and hoping that you can find a place where everybody will be comfortable. Well, we can do much better than that with remote controlled software that always keeps the temperature in each zone within a specified range. Whatever the customer wants, we can keep it within that range. We usually ask for either 2 degrees or 3 degrees, depending on how much savings they want to have, 2 degrees above and 2 degrees below the set point they would plan to set it at. And then that turns out to be a ton of energy. You can move a lot of energy off peaks with just a couple or 3 degrees of shifting capability. So yeah, so the customer is more convenient, has more comfort and convenience. There's no wasted mistakes. Buildings make all kinds of dumb mistakes. So there's one of the other car dealers we worked with, another one in Colorado, said the peace of mind he gets from just knowing that his staff doesn't leave the heating or air conditioning on when they go home at night. That alone saves them enough to justify the investment. So yeah, so the better control, better comfort, better economics for the end customer, simple, more compelling quotes for the partners.
Makes sense. So building control systems, they are notoriously complex. And how do you get all those devices and systems to work together?
Well, yeah, this is sort of why this hasn't been done extensively before, right? If this was easy, everybody would do it. We put a lot of work into both the forecasting and optimization algorithms and in the control interfaces for the building. So we started this project with a grant from the US Department of Energy. Shout out to the Solar Energy Technology Office. And yeah, they gave us a grant of more than $1 million to do all the underlying engineering and technology work to prove that this would work in the wild, in the real world, because they can see that this is something that the solar business needs very badly, right? Is they need a better way for buildings to make more use of the solar that they're generating. So the interfaces to the building energy management systems or to the smart thermostats are definitely not for the faint of heart. We've put a ton of work into that stuff, and we have really good success working with a bunch of the different technologies that you can run into in buildings. We speak all the standards, we speak BACnet, so that's the lingua franca of a lot of medium commercial offices in particular, but some retail as well. And then we speak all the wireless protocols, so we can talk to wireless communicating thermostats via Wi-Fi or Zigbee or Z-Wave. So yeah, there's no question that that's one of the harder parts of the process, and what we've tried to do is make it hard on ourselves and easy on our partners. So we put a lot of that work into our software and support systems so that the solar installer can just focus on a quick change out and turning all the information over to us for control.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about your trajectory as a company. What kind of traction are you getting currently?
Yeah, so definitely it's been a crazy year, and I'm sure everyone says that about themselves and the world at this point. So we really only announced this product, DemandEx, to the solar community at last year's SPI, so 1 year ago, basically. And since then, it's just been very gratifying to see all the solar project developers and EPCs who have come running, because the notion that you can do this kind of demand and TOU savings without batteries is very appealing. So we went from having maybe a handful of partners to, we've had, I think, 280 partners call us in the meantime, almost one a day since last year, seeing if they can become resellers. At least 80 of those are serious enough to have signed NDAs and started sending us project-specific customer data. So we like to look at the 15-minute interval load shapes of all the buildings before we give a estimate of what the savings will be. And we've integrated with tools like Energy Toolbase to provide smooth quotes back to the customer through our partners. So it's the traction's been excellent. We have customers now in California, Northern and Southern California, Colorado, working on a bunch of them in different areas around the country. So we got off to this great start at the beginning of this year, and then in Q2, just about everybody disappeared, and we had our moment of panic, like so many other businesses. Um, we used the time well. The second quarter, we turned inward. We worked on, sort of cleaning up the training materials and the product interfaces and the documentation and all the things you want for the thing to be more polished and ready for the market. And fortunately, in Q3, all the solar installers we thought we had lost popped back up, and we're back to work. So I think there was a lot of uncertainty about what people could and couldn't do in buildings, and a lot of that got cleared up. Solar is an essential business. That's been clarified. All the precautions around masking and, PPE and all the rest have been taken care of, and people now know how to get a lot of this work done. And it's looking like a great fourth quarter, as people, and you can tell me, but this is what we keep seeing is people, just like in a lot of other years, solar is closing deals like mad in the fourth quarter this year.
Yeah, it does seem like the solar industry as a whole really is going to make a strong comeback in Q3 and Q4. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very unique situation here in Illinois. We're cresting after a 3-year, new rec market. So it's a
Yeah.
very unique circumstance.
Yeah.
But since you have a background on the utility side as well, John, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the big picture, and how do utilities respond to products like DemandEx?
Yeah. So, I mean, the utilities that are smart realize that the solar is coming with or without them. So, the ones we've worked with, and we're doing pilot projects with a big investor-owned utility and one of the uh, consumer choice aggregators in California. The smart ones see DemandEx as a way of mitigating the duck curve problem that is so frequently discussed in California and beyond, a smart way to mitigate the variation of power on their local distribution grid, smart way to have, commercial buildings that have gone solar present an easier and less costly load profile to meet. We're working on a pilot with one utility to test the joint customer and grid benefits of load flexibility, so that you could use it most of the time just for demand charge, for beating the tariff behind the meter. And then in grid emergencies, or when grid prices made it worthwhile, you could use it to respond to signals from the utility as well. So software is great because it's very flexible. You can adapt it to a number of different scenarios. So primarily we're focused on that behind the meter value proposition for the solar customer. But if there's money to be made for that customer by giving some of that flexibility back to the grid, then you can do that too.
I have noticed that some of the utilities are, asking customers if they'll opt in to the utility controlling their smart thermostat.
Sure.
Will utilities talk directly to your the hub, or whatever that piece of hardware is, the gateway, excuse me?
Yeah, that we'll talk to the gateway, but the utility could talk to our cloud software and give a request, and then we could send that request to the building to see if it was willing to make changes. So this would be entirely opt-in on the part of the building. So I've worked in programs like this for many years. Utilities tend to call these things demand response, which I think is a terrible phrase. Nobody wakes up thinking that they want to help the utility. They wake up thinking they want to help their own business. But we can help our commercial customers navigate their way through those kind of programs and see where it makes sense for them to make some additional money off of the utilities grid issues. So there won't be a case where the utility is directly controlling our box, but there might be a case where you could opt into utility control if you wanted to make some additional money off the flexibility in your own systems.
Very good. So what else should our viewers know about Extensible Energy, especially solar installers and solar developers?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to make sure everybody realizes is when people hear we're from California, they think, oh, so you're a California company. No, we're a software company and we're working nationally, and we've started to sign deals with international partners now. So we're a national firm. We're already working in the Midwest where you guys are, and then also all up and down the East Coast. Basically anywhere there's a demand charge of above $8 or a similar capacity charge or a steep differential between on-peak and off-peak charges, we're working with partners all over the country. Second thing I want to stress is while we say load flexibility, I want to stress that this is load flexibility software. This is a software company. We rely on our partners to do all the on-site work. Of course, we'll do the first one with you. Of course, we'll give you training, but this is a new trick for our partners to bring to their field practice and sales practice. So this will make your, it'll make your quotes more compelling when you present them to your customers. And we're not going to be the ones who are showing up in a truck. So we're a software company based in Berkeley, California. We can't go do site installations all over the country. You're going to do those. And then when we say that, we mean that we are entirely partner driven. So one thing to think about, everybody asks, well, can I be exclusive with this? And the answer is yes, on every single deal. So any deal you bring us, we'll only work with one partner. And when you bring us a deal, we'll work with you until you either stop working on that deal or close it with us. So because we are entirely partner driven, we want to keep our partners incented to close deals and repeat the business, because once you learn to do this, it'll make closing the next deal that much easier. And again, here it is, fourth quarter. This is another tool in your tool belt to help you close deals faster and give a more compelling quote than your competitor.
Great. And how can people reach you, John?
So the best way is on our website. It's just extensibleenergy.com. There's a lot of ease in that. So just spell it all out, extensibleenergy.com, and then hit that get in touch button, and that'll take you directly to our partner manager. Shane will set up a time to walk you through the whole process, show you how you can start uploading data from specific deals that we can analyze for you. Well, again, all that's free. We will do demand charge and tariff analysis for anybody who wants to do it with us. And if you want a free analysis of any of your prospective customer deals to see how DemandEx can increase utility bill savings that you can provide to your customer, please consider working with us. If you're considering a battery in particular, consider checking us out first and seeing if it really makes more sense to just go with something a lot easier to implement.
Great. Well, thank you, John. I just have a couple of announcements. You can check out all of our content at cesnrg.com/videos. We also have pre-announced events at cesnrg.com/podcast. In November, we have Michael Mills Price from PVEL or PV Evolution Labs coming on the show. So please subscribe to our channel. It is day 22 of the Solar 500 channel. So we are trying to grow our channel and really appreciate all of our listeners. And I want to thank our guest today for coming on the show, John Powers with Extensible Energy. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, Tim. Thank you.